So we just got into chapter 4 on Sunday. And what's the scene? What are we looking at?
Throne.
We're looking at the throne scene. And let's remind ourselves, what are some of the things that we see when we look at this throne scene?
24 elders.
Okay, 24 elders, and what do we say those represent?
12 tribes and 12 apostles.
Okay, 12 tribes and 12 apostles. You'll see 12 come up again in the book of Revelation. 7 is a common number in the book of Revelation, as well as 10 or some multiple of 10, usually. So those are some of the most common numbers that you see in the book. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So what did we mention in the Old Testament? Whenever you come across a throne scene, what's usually the primary context? When does God reveal himself on a throne? Yeah, it's usually in some sense of judgment and related to judgment with idolatry, people worshiping other gods in some context. One of the throne scenes that we didn't talk about last time, that we recently studied, comes from Daniel chapter 7. And if you look, if you remember in Daniel chapter 7, he begins by talking about how these beasts come and they're persecuting the saints of God. They're persecuting God's people. And then once you get to Daniel 7 and verse 9, it says, and then you see the scene of the Ancient of Days on his throne. And if you look in chapter Daniel 7, verses 9 and 10, do you see any similarities there?
Yes. The fire coming out of the throne.
Okay.
And that he is seated, he's not moving. And
Okay.
he is ministered by 10,000 times 10,000.
Okay, so he's on the throne. Fire is there. Vesture like white snow, hair like pure wool, and thousands attending to him, worshiping him, and serving him. So very similar scene. And then if you remember in Daniel chapter 7, when he keeps looking down in verse 13, who comes to the one on the throne? Okay, it says, one like a son of man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And in Daniel 7 and verse 14, what happens?
The Son of Man is given dominion,
Okay,
glory, and a kingdom.
given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, and everybody serves him. All peoples, all nations of every language serve him. And so he's got this everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. It's very important to remember this context when we're looking at Revelation chapters 4 and 5, because ultimately it's an expanded version of Daniel chapter 7. So we already saw as we began looking in Revelation chapter 4, we see the throne scene, the first part of Daniel 7, where you get the picture of God and his throne, and he's powerful, and the rainbow and all of the scenes there. And then you see the creatures that are serving him. So that's the first part of Daniel 7 that we see in Revelation chapter 4. And as we get into chapter 5 in just a little bit, you're going to see the second part of Daniel chapter 7. Yes.
What is the significance, or what am I supposed to be visualizing in verse 3 when I see that he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardius stone? And also that the rainbow around the throne was in appearance like an emerald.
Yeah, it's been a little bit since I looked up what those stones were, but the basic idea is they're two precious types of stone. We're a little more familiar with jasper. I don't know if anybody's familiar with sardius. I'm not recently, anyways. Anybody? Do you?
Maybe represents beauty and value.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. Things, especially in the ancient world, you study history, what do they do with their palaces? They decorate it in gold and stones to show their beauty. Some of the, even when you're talking about Babylon in Germany today, you can go and see in the Museum of Germany the Wall of Babylon. I think Joe had some pictures of that during his class, but it had beautiful painted stones, and it had precious stones within the walls. And so it's showing, I've got riches and power, and this is where you're going to find value. Rufus.
That class of stones are noted for their reflective qualities. Being able to those, it's a class of stones that just they reflect the light, so that it's very brightness.
Right. Yeah, it's reflecting God's glory, and it's just magnifying what's going on in the scene, I think. Joe?
He is absolutely not human. His appearance is so different, like those,
Right.
that he is absolutely not like us.
Yeah, this is no ordinary human king sitting on a throne. It's something much grander, and even just the fact in that same verse, the fact that there was a rainbow around the throne. Now, obviously, what's the biblical significance of a rainbow? The promise of what?
No more flooding.
No more flooding.
The whole world.
Yeah, God said, I'm never going to do this again. And when you see the rainbow, you know that this is my promise to you. But even setting that aside, there's no king, no human that can say, I want one of those too. Put one on my throne. You can't do that. A rainbow is built into the fabric of the universe and how it's created. And so only the creator of the universe can summon a rainbow as he pleases.
This was a green rainbow.
Like an emerald.
A green rainbow.
Yeah, rainbow around the throne like an emerald in appearance. Yes. So, and what do you notice about the 24 elders in verse 4? How are they described? Okay, it's a repeated thing. Remember, we saw in the letters to the churches, to him who overcomes, I will grant him, I will clothe him in a white robe. God's the one that can make pure. It harkens back, and there's some later similarity in the book of Revelation to Zechariah chapter 6, I think it is, where the high priest Joshua is covered in sin. He's covered in a filthy garment, and God cleanses him and makes his garment pure. And what else about the 24 elders?
And later on in Revelation, it talks about righteous men made perfect. That's what I get in my head when I read about them being clothed in white garments.
Yeah, it's God's the one that has justified them. They're righteous and they're made perfect by him.
Seated, sometimes that indicates position of importance.
Okay, just as God is seated on his throne, they're seated on thrones around him. Anything else in the New Testament about that? Mhm.
Even they, in front
Yeah.
of this incredible one, fall down before him.
Yeah, these that are on their throne, they fall down before God. Talks about that we are, all Christians, are seated with Christ in the heavenly places in Ephesians. And so, just as the leaders of the tribes, just as elders today are saints, are God's people, we're all equal together, sitting on thrones, reigning with Jesus. So, go ahead.
They're justified, I mean, they are redeemed in their white robes. They are, their sin has been washed away. But then they have golden crowns, which means they're glorified, that golden crown.
Right. They've been glorified by giving us, being given that crown. When you look in verse 5 and how it describes what's happening with the throne, out of the throne come flashes of lightning, sounds and peals of thunder. What biblical event does that remind you of? Sinai. Mount Sinai. Remember when Israel came to Mount Sinai? How did they respond to what they heard and saw there? They were terrified. Don't even talk to us. Moses, you talk to him for us because we don't even want to come close. We're scared of this scene and the burning that was going on the mountain. Why would we hearken back to Sinai? Why is that important in this throne image?
Because that's where God comes down to earth,
Okay?
as great as he is.
Yeah, he comes down and he says, I'm coming to meet with my people.
I was going to say God interacting with humanity.
Yeah, God's interacting with humanity. He's always wanted to, from the days of walking in the garden to Sinai, throughout the Old Testament history into now. He wants to be with his people, even as great and powerful as he is. Anything else? What? He gives them the law. What did the last 2 chapters remind them of? Can they just, do whatever you want and it'll be fine? No. Yeah, you're doing some things that are right, but I have this against you. You're transgressing my law in those things. And so part of the scene also reminds them, just as he's great and powerful and on their side, he's great and powerful and worthy to be obeyed. And then in verse 6, what's before the throne? A sea of glass. Anybody know what the sea was often associated with in the ancient world? Chaos. Death, evil. Now, this is a sea of glass before the throne of God. But what could that mean? What could that mean to them in seeing the throne scene of God?
They also had the sea of water for the sacrifices outside of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And so potentially you could get the image of that was necessary. It was on the approach to God, to offering up sacrifices to God. They used it for purification. So I mean, I don't know. To me, there's just a lot of imagery there. Before you could go to the temple, you had to stop by the sea.
Right. Yeah, and there's also a lot of temple imagery being used in this book, and even especially when you get towards the end, it kind of pictures heaven with some of the scenery from the temple and the measurements of the temple and things like that. But the other thing that you notice throughout Revelation, in chapter 15 and verse 2, there's another scene, and the sea is still there before the throne of God, as Things are still going on as God's dealing with this enemy. The sea is still present. But when you get to chapter 21 and verse 1, it calls out that there is no longer any sea. If sea represents evil and chaos and death in their minds, the vision of, so in starting in chapter 20 and verse 11, it says, after God does away with the enemies, after God does away with Satan, and finally casts him into hell, the very next thing says, earth and heaven has fled away from his presence before his throne. And then it leads up and it says there's no longer any sea. The sea of death and chaos and evil is gone. It's been removed. And now there's direct access to the presence of God. Dan?
So in this context here, what I would get from that, the sea is vast. Glass is clear, crystal pure. I get a vastness of purity from that statement.
Yeah. When you look out to the sea, if you're on the beach or something, look out to the sea, it's vast as you look out. Yes. Steve?
I don't know if this is a correlation or not, but in Daniel, there was 4 beasts that were evil beings that came up out of the sea.
Right.
Now he mentions the sea and 4 new beasts, only these are not evil beasts.
The creatures that are there around the throne. Yes. Yeah. I don't know if there's a tie-in there or not. I hadn't thought about that, but yes, I see those similarities. But yeah, I think that also emphasizes that's what they thought about with the sea, is the beast coming out of it. Tim?
I get also the image that the sea is always, you always have waves, so you're always moving, always in motion, whereas sea glass would be calm, still.
Yeah. So even this sea that they're used to thinking about that way is calm. It's that just clear as glass before God. Okay, so when you get down to verses, you see the creatures and how they're described, some similar features to the different animals as some of the beasts are described, as Steve was making that connection for us from Daniel. But there are these amazing creatures that serve God, that worship God. And then we see them, they're falling down, and they do not cease to say in verse 8, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God the Almighty, who was and who is to come." Very similar to the throne scene in Isaiah 6. When you get down to verses 9 through 11 with the elders, what are the elders doing, and how often do they do this?
Forever and ever.
Okay. Day and night, forever and ever. And what are they doing forever and ever? Falling down. What else? Casting their crown. When you put a crown on your head, what are you saying? Okay, I reign. And Jesus gave that to us. We reign in Christ. But what does it mean if I cast my crown before? Submission. Yeah, I've been granted to reign with Jesus, but I fully acknowledge he is the king. He is the one that we serve and deserves all honor and glory. And they're doing this day and night, forever and ever. I want you to look real quick in chapter 14, Revelation 14. And we're going to begin reading in verse 9. Revelation 14 and verse 9. Then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day and night, those who worship the beast in his image and whoever receives the mark of his name." The same phrase is used here that's used to describe the elders, how day and night forever and ever they're there worshiping God and in his presence. Those who are not faithful to him, those who worship the beast instead, which, as we'll read on, the Revelation tells us is that the beast is powered by Satan. And so it's ultimately people who chose Satan in the world over God. And what are they doing in contrast to the elders? Day and night, forever and ever. I'm sorry?
Yeah,
Tormented.
but they're worshiping the beast. I mean,
Yeah,
they have the same kind.
Yeah, they worshipped now the beast, and because they worship the beast, they're tormented, no rest, day and night, forever and ever. The very, very similar description to how Jesus describes hell. That's what's going on with those who choose to worship the beast. And so we can live for God now, so that later we will have no rest day or night, but we'll be worshiping him for eternity. We won't need the rest. Or we can worship the beast now. We can worship the world now. And we will have no rest day and night, and we will long for rest for all eternity. Sam?
Yeah, there's a doctrine, some call it the doctrine of annihilation, that has the idea that at judgment, you're judged, and then you're basically just blown away, destroyed, annihilated, and you don't have to face eternal consequences. But it's very clear, even though this is imagery, it's very clear what the image is trying to portray,
Right.
along with other passages. And so, yeah, if you think about it duration-wise, it's the same duration.
Yeah?
And so
Right.
where do we want to be during that duration?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty within this book, no one preached about hell more than Jesus. He is the one that tells us the most about hell in the Bible. And I think you're right. There's some passages that people pull that idea from, but when you put all of the pieces together, that's not the right description. Jesus describes it as an eternal death, as an eternal punishment.
And tormented in the presence of.
Yeah.
In the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. That's remarkably shameful.
Yeah. Yeah. That Paul said that every knee will bow. Some of those are bowing in humble praise, and some of those are bowing because they're finally forced to bow before the one who rules. So, this is the picture that we have of the throne scene in chapter 4. Now let's turn to chapter 5 and see the next scene. I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a book, written inside and on the back, sealed up with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and to break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look into it. Then I began to weep greatly, because no one was found worthy to open the book or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, "Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals." And I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing as if slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. When he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals, for you were slain and purchased for God with your blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth." Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, and the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was myriads of myriads and thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." And every created thing which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth and on the sea and all things in them, I heard saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and dominion forever and ever." And the 4 living creatures kept saying, "Amen." And the elders fell down and worshiped. Can't hardly help but to say amen myself in reading that. So remember how chapter 4 started. So try to keep kind of the outline of the book. You have this introduction in chapter 1 where we're introduced to this vision of Jesus. And then before he gets in to continue the vision, you've got chapters 2 and 3 where he has these letters to the churches to remind them of their commitment and their need to follow him and the rewards to come if they follow. But then chapter 4 says, "After these things I looked, and behold, a door." Now, here's the message. Here's the rest of the vision. Here's what I want you to know about the things which must soon take place, he said at the beginning of chapter 1. So I've given you the warning. I've encouraged you to be faithful. I've reminded you what you're living for. I reminded you what I've done for you. Now let me show you what I'm going to do for my people. And so you go through and you see God on his throne, and then you get to chapter 5, and he's got a book. And it's written all over, front and back. But what's the problem with this book? It's sealed with 7 seals. When you're going through this, you're suffering, you're facing these challenges that these Christians are facing, and now you've got a message from the Lord. What are you looking for? What are you hoping the message he's going to bring? Answers and hope. Why is this happening? And what are you going to do about it? And so finally, you see God on his throne and he's got a book. Finally, we're going to have answers. Finally, God's going to tell us his plan about what we're going through. But nobody can open it. No one. And it's not just no one on the earth. It's no one under the earth. What do you think that's referring to? Yeah, no person from the earth past is going to be able to do it. But even more than that, what's the very first thing he says in verse 3? No one in heaven No one in heaven. So we're going to read about the archangel later. We're going to see some powerful angels that God uses to do his bidding. But there is not an angel that is worthy to open this book.
Said it, we just read about the 24 elders. With gold
24
crowns.
elders?
They weren't.
These magnificent creatures with their wings, they're not worthy to open it either. Remember what the book of Hebrews tells us. Angels are there as ministers of God, but they are nothing compared to Jesus, to the Son of God. He is the ruler. He is the Son. There is nobody worthy that John sees. And so he begins to cry. And one of the elders tells him, don't cry. The lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals. So, the lion, what does that remind you of? What does that take you to? Well,
Promise to
Judah.
that the blessing.
Yeah, so the lion of the tribe of Judah, right, takes us back to the end of the book of Genesis when Jacob gives blessings to his sons and he calls Judah that he's a lion. And when you look at the wars in the Old Testament and when Israel goes out to war, if I'm not mistaken, every time Judah is at the front. Check me on that. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure every time Judah's at the front when they go out to war. So here's the lion of the tribe of Judah. They're in a war with evil, and God and he's coming. The lion of the tribe of Judah is coming, but not just the lion of the tribe of Judah, but what? How else is he described? The root of David. So these promises, now we were back in the promises of Genesis. Now we've moved forward to 2 Samuel chapter 7 and the promises that God gives to David and says, one's going to come from you that's going to sit on the throne and his kingdom will never end. His rule will never end. It's a reminder his rule has not ended. Just because he's not on the earth, just because you don't see him, his rule has not ended. He is still the king. And he has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals. What else? What other thoughts do you have up through verse 5?
Daniel wanted so much to keep the book open, and God said to him, close it up.
Yeah.
And it had been all this time until John
Yeah.
sees who can open it.
There's a lot of things that God revealed to Daniel and that Daniel was allowed to reveal to God's people, but there came some visions that God said, seal it up because the time is far from now. And then Revelation opens up and says, I'm going to tell you about some things that are soon to take place.
But who is worthy? Who is good enough? I mean, that's what it boils down to. Who's
Right.
good enough? But
Right.
when you get down to verse 5, prevailed to open. So it took work on Jesus' part to be good enough.
Yeah.
It's not just something that was inherent in him.
Yeah. Again, using the book of Hebrews and that language, it was fitting for him to take on the flesh, to become like one of us and to become our propitiation and do what he did to save us and to make us his people.
And it says here that, kind of using the same word that was in each of the letters, he has overcome,
Yeah.
which is what he was telling them to do.
Right. Exactly. He has overcome, and then what are we supposed to do? What did Jesus say when he walked the earth we were supposed to do? Take up your cross and follow me. And then Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And then The book of Hebrews says, look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. So yes, he overcame, and then he calls us to overcome. So you get this powerful image of the Lion of the tribe of Judah, but then you get to verse 6, and then what seems to change?
It's a lamb.
It's not a lion. It's not just a lamb, but what about the lamb?
It was slain.
Standing as if slain. Does this look like someone who can win a war for you? A lamb that looks as if it's dead. How are we going to stand up against the Roman Empire with a lamb that looks as if it's dead?
But in the fact of his death or him being slain is where victory lies. I was thinking when everybody was quoting all those other things about Christ and falling, and my mind went to greater is he that is in you
Yeah.
than he that is in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so Christ has proven even through death he overcomes. And I think about these brethren who are facing horrific things. He wants them to understand that they can overcome as well.
Yeah.
Maybe in a weird way.
Right.
Kind of like Jesus. Jesus, how did he overcome Satan?
Right.
How did he win that battle? He did it in that he gave his life and he was raised. And so
Yeah.
I look at that a lot with this concept of, Christ who overcame.
Yeah, I think a lot of times us 2,000 years later are pretty hard on people in the New Testament, because I try to picture myself, if I had been there in the first century seeing Jesus, I would have thought, what a fool. This nobody from Galilee thought he could be something, thought he could do this. I probably would have been just like the rest of them. Because everything that Jesus did, it didn't make sense according to the ways of the world. It didn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense that a lamb standing as if slain is now going to help them. But it's a powerful reminder of what they have believed for decades now, since Jesus died and rose again. They have believed. What have they said and remembered every Sunday since the day of Pentecost? Yeah, his death, and that his death means he's coming again, right? They've taken the Lord's Supper just like we've continued to take the Lord's Supper every Sunday since then. You think about that. I heard someone once do a sermon to talk about the chain of people that have remembered the Lord. It's a chain over time and a chain over land. That every Sunday all across the world, as the sun goes around, God's people are gathering in different situations and different places, taking that bread and taking that cup just like us. And people have been doing it for 2,000 years. It's a chain that we're a part of and that we're going to be a part of until Jesus comes back. But seeing the lamb standing as if slain was a reminder, stop looking at things with worldly eyes. You're looking for a lion, you think he's going to come ferocious, jump on the scene, and just eat up the enemies, and then you see the lamb, and it's a reminder, God doesn't work the way humans often think that he should. And we have to trust him, because he's going to rule no matter what. And it's a reminder, and the elders, the creatures, all of them, they remember, they understand what this is a reminder of, and so what are they saying?
You're worthy to take the scroll.
Right. You are worthy. They sang a new song. Why is it a new song? Yeah.
It comes after deliverance, just like coming out of Egypt,
Right.
crossing the Red Sea, destruction of the enemy. They sing a new song.
Yeah.
It's a deliverance. It's a brand new time.
Right. Later in the book, they're going to sing the song of Moses and the Lamb in a way that Israel couldn't sing it at that time.
It's definitely different because it says out of every kindred and tongue and people, and before it was the children of Israel.
It's a great point. And was that different than what they thought God was going to do? You know, so again, even the fact that it's all people, all tongues, everyone, not just descendants of Abraham, are there reigning, saved by the Messiah. He can do abundantly above and beyond all that we ask and think.
Verse 7 says he came and took the book out of the right hand of the one that sat on the throne.
Yeah.
He took it.
He came up to the throne of God and took the book. How can he do that? He was worthy.
Plus he had dominion over all.
Yeah, he has dominion. It's his right because he is God. He is the king just like the one on the throne.
He's something else I've noticed ever since I've been reading the book of Revelations. He says in verse 6, he says, talking about as if slain having 7 horns and 7 eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he explains what them are. Them are the 7 spirits, God. And then down in verse 8 he says, and each one of them holding a harp and a golden bowl full of incense. And then he explains what they were,
Mm-hmm.
which are the prayers of the saints.
Yeah.
But if you go through the whole book of the rest of the book, you don't really break it down like that, unless I've missed something.
Mm-hmm.
But, explaining, because like it says there, the 7, each one had a harp and golden bowls full of incense.
Right.
What would that be? And he explains what it is.
Yes.
Then the rest of the book, I always look for the right explanation.
Right. Yeah. And
She wouldn't be guessing or whatever.
right. And the incense in the Old Testament talks about how when they burned it and it rose up to God and it became a sweet smell to God when they did that just as he had asked. And now the incense of our prayers they go up to him.
Yeah, he wanted us to know that. Important points there.
Right.
Explain.
And he calls out in verse 9, worthy are you to take the book to break its seals, for you were slain and purchased for God with your blood. He purchased us. We're his people. And then again, something he's already said in chapter 1, you have made them, it says in some translations to be a kingdom, in others it says to be kings and priests to our God. And they will reign upon the earth. It's a reminder that they're reigning even in the midst of this. What is a major factor that enabled God to use Christ to fulfill his plan this way? What are some of the things you would say that Jesus lived that enabled him to be used by God? He was perfect. What else?
He was the Son of God.
He was God's son. No, he was God. No one else could fill that role.
He obeyed God's will.
Yeah, he obeyed God. I think you said submission. So, again, he overcame. We are to overcome, and we follow in his steps. We're not the Son of God, but the Son of God empowers us to submit, to obey, to be faithful, even in the midst of dark and challenging times. Look at verse 8 again, and what it says, how he is praised there. In chapter 5 and verse 8, what it says about him, and then go back to chapter 4 and verse 10. And what happens in both of these verses? The 24 elders are falling down before the one on the throne. And in chapter 5, they're falling down before the Lamb. Again, it shows that what Dale was just calling out, that he is God. He's the Son of God. And they have the same response to the Lamb as they do to the one on the throne. And then one last thing. Look in chapter 5, verses 11 to 14. And you see him who sits on the throne and the Lamb being worshiped together. And what's emphasized? Just read it one more time. And what's emphasized here about both of them?
Verse 12,
Yeah. What do you see?
the worthiness.
Worthy is the Lamb.
And then I see 7 characteristics
Yeah.
of power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing.
Yeah. To receive all of these things. Who's giving these things to him? God? God.
Verse 11, everyone.
Yeah, I think it's all of us. Yes, God is the one that granted him dominion to reign, but it's the thousands and thousands, including us, that serve him, that give back. We serve him with our power. We serve him with our riches. We serve him with our wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. Worthy is him to receive everything that we have because what? Because he was slain. Because he purchased us. Because we're his. And everything that we have came from him. Any other thoughts from chapter 5?
Well, time's up for tonight, but maybe next time we can talk about what it means, each opening a heart. Maybe we can talk about that.
Okay. All right. We can do that. Thank you.